Teacher gave me detention for being 30 seconds late, so I got her fired for showing up hungover. I was a junior in high school and had this absolute nightmare of a teacher, Mrs. Brennan. She taught AP history and thought she was running boot camp instead of a classroom. This woman would literally time you walking through the door with a stopwatch, and if you were even a second late, boom, detention slip. I wasn't even a bad student. I had like a 3.8 GPA and barely ever got in trouble. But Mrs. Brennan had it out for me ever since I accidentally corrected her about some Civil War date in front of the whole class back in September. She never forgot that embarrassment. The morning this all went down, my mom's car wouldn't start, so I had to wait for my neighbor to give me a ride. I literally sprinted through the hallways trying to make it to first period on time. I slid into my seat just as the bell was finishing ringing, like you could still hear the echo. Mrs. Brennan looked right at me with this evil smirk and said, "Late again, Rodriguez. Detention after school." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I checked my phone. The bell had literally just stopped. I tried explaining about my mom's car, but she cut me off and said, "Excuses won't get you far in life." That detention slip was my breaking point. I'd watched this woman hand out detentions like candy for months. Kids getting detention for sneezing too loud, for their pen clicking, for literally breathing wrong. She was on some weird power trip. But here's where it gets interesting. During lunch that day, I was venting to my friend Tyler about the whole thing when he mentioned something that made my ears perk up. He said his mom worked in the main office and had mentioned seeing Mrs. Brennan stumbling around before first period that morning, reeking of alcohol. Now I'm thinking back to first period, and suddenly everything clicks. Mrs. Brennan had been weirdly shaky during class. She kept sipping from this huge coffee mug and her handwriting on the board was messier than usual. At one point, she even grabbed the desk to steady herself while explaining the assignment. I decided to do some investigating. During my free period, I hung around the hallway outside her classroom and watched her through the little window in the door. She was definitely off. She knocked over a stack of papers, couldn't seem to focus on grading, and kept drinking from that mug. Plus, her hair looked like she'd slept in her car. That's when I remembered. My older sister had told me about this anonymous tip line the school district set up after some scandal with a teacher a few years back. Students could report inappropriate behavior without giving their names. So that night, I called the tip line and explained everything. I mentioned the smell Tyler's mom noticed, the weird behavior in class, the shaking hands, and how she seemed drunk during first period. I made sure to mention specific times and details so they'd know I wasn't just making stuff up. 2 days later, during third period, I see the principal and some woman in a suit walk into Mrs. Brennan's classroom. 20 minutes later, they're escorting her out with a box of her stuff. Word spread through school like wildfire. Apparently, they'd found a flask of vodka in her desk drawer, and she'd failed some kind of sobriety test. Turns out, Mrs. Brennan had been showing up drunk for weeks. The administration had to review all the detentions and suspensions she'd handed out that month. My detention got wiped from my record, along with like 30 other kids who'd been victims of her ridiculous power trips. The best part? During the investigation, they found out she'd been drinking during parent-teacher conferences too. Multiple parents had complained about her acting strange, but the school had just brushed it off. My one phone call opened up this whole can of worms. She ended up getting fired, obviously, and last I heard she had to do some court-ordered rehab program.